So far, we've talked about pitch and resonance in your voice and how these affect how people perceive gender. But although these are two main parts of gender perception, it's not all there is to it. As well as making your vocal folds vibrate faster or slower to change your pitch, you can also change the configuration of your vocal folds to change how they vibrate, changing your phonation type. There are a lot of different types of phonation, but three common ones are breathy voice, which sounds like this, creaky voice, which sounds like this, and modal voice, which is when there's no creakiness or breathiness in your voice. We know that there are gender differences in phonation, and we know that these gender differences are different in different languages and accents across the world. For example, in North America, creaky voice is particularly associated with young female speakers, but in previous studies in Scotland, creaky voice was found more often in male speakers. In both places, however, breathy voice is more common in female speakers. In my research, I wanted to look at how much phonation type affected people's perception of someone's gender, so I recorded a female speaker from Glasgow and I manipulated her phonation type so that it was either breathy, modal, or creaky. I also manipulated her pitch, so that it fell into either a typical female, typical male, or ambiguous pitch range. I then asked North American and Scottish people to listen to her speaking, without knowing who she was, to see how they would rate her gender. As you might expect, because in both North America and Scotland women tend to use lots of breathy voice, when listeners heard a breathy voice they were more likely to say it belonged to a woman. This means that it's not just pitch and resonance that are important for how we perceive gender, phonation type is important too. But less expected was that both North American and Scottish listeners thought that creaky voices sounded less masculine. This could mean that in Scotland, creaky voices might no longer be associated with male speakers as they once were. But Scottish and North American listeners didn't rate gender in the voices in the same way. In fact, North American listeners were more likely than Scottish listeners to say that the person speaking was a woman, even when we had manipulated pitch to fall into a typical male range. This means that the way that we perceive gender in people's voices is something we learn, because it's different between people who come from different backgrounds. But no matter where you come from, pitch, resonance, and phonation probably all play a role in how you perceive gender in people's voices.